Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Katherine Thweatt, and I'm the current chair of NCA's Teaching and Learning Council and an associate professor at SUNY. I'm thrilled to welcome you to today's virtual learning opportunity titled Resilience Strategies in the Face of Threat. VLOs are exclusive, members-only sessions designed to foster connection, learning, and growth within the NCA community. Through interactive discussions and expert-led presentations, this series provides a space for members to engage with cutting-edge research, explore best practices, and collaborate on pressing issues in the field of communication. By enhancing access, engagement, and a sense of ownership within the association, VLOs create conditions that empower members in their professional and scholarly pursuits. As part of NCA's broader mission to embrace and enact inclusion, equity, and access, VLOs serve as a platform for advocating and advancing these principles in communication scholarship, teaching, and professional practice. It is our hope that VLOs are a vital resource for NCA members dedicated to lifelong learning and professional development. You can find more information about this year's VLOs on our NCA website at natcom.org. Today's VLO will arm you with tools and strategies to create an inclusive classroom environment in the current political climate. Understand the relationship between risk to individuals and risk to institutions, and promoting public pedagogy in an era of misinformation. Before we jump in, though, I'm going to do our land acknowledgement. NCA would like to acknowledge the land the national office in Washington, D.C. resides on. It's the ancestral and unceded territory of the Natchitoches and Piscataway people. NCA acknowledges that it has often gathered upon unceded lands, and those gatherings manifested the exclusions and erasures of many indigenous peoples. We acknowledge the grave harm that colonialism brought to these lands, in particular, the erasure of both indigenous and African identities by slavery and by racist laws that segregated all peoples into binary classifications of white and Black. This acknowledgement demonstrates our commitment to beginning the process of working to disseminate the ongoing legacies of settler colonialisms. Thank you. We have an excellent lineup of speakers today. They're going to be sharing their research and perspectives with us. Our first presentation is Building Bridges, Community-Centered Approaches to Inclusive Education in Challenging Times, and it'll be delivered by Shauntae B. White from North Carolina Central University. Shauntae is a professor in the Department of Mass Communication at North Carolina Central University, where she also serves as the Associate Dean for Faculty Development and Administration in the College of Arts, Social Sciences, and Humanities. Since 2020, she has been instrumental in the Office of Faculty Professional Development and a faculty fellow, creating and leading innovative workshops focused on pedagogy, effective teaching, and faculty development. Most notably, Dr. White is excellent at motivating, innovating, and inspiring others to teach well. Her research focuses on critically analyzing the representation of Black women in media. Next, we'll hear from Michael Lechuga from the University of North Mexico. He'll present on Skin in the Game, Learning from the End of DEI. Michael Lechuga is chair and associate professor in the Department of Communication and Journalism, where he researches and teaches rhetoric, settler colonial studies, and cultural studies. His research broadly focuses on how settler colonial logics are mapped onto Turtle Island, which is North America, and the interventions anti-colonial agents and thinkers make in resistance. Additionally, Dr. Lechuga studies the relationship between technologies and new media and the indigenous ways of knowing become adopted, co-opted, or negated by these technologies in media, in politics, and in the classroom. And finally, we will hear from Dr. Angela Kariotis from Brookdale Community College on facilitating difficult discussions. She is an artistic public servant. She is a healing-centered education practitioner, building creative experiences, serving the needs of cities, institutions, and students of all ages for public good. She integrates restorative practices with the pedagogy of play for a transformative learning experience. She is curriculum director and facilitator of Walking the Beat, a national arts education program interrogating the history of police, the way we police each other, and ideating alternative cultures of care. She's director of the Center of Transformative Learning at Brookdale Community College. Her current theme across all of her works is Democracy Takes Courage. I'll be moderating today's program and helping field questions at the end, so please feel free to drop in any questions in the chat. Anything that comes to mind during the presentation, please use the raise hand function. We all know how to do that, so shouldn't be an issue. You can do that during the presentation or at the end. And following today's presentation, if you could please help us to complete the feedback survey, that would be great. And if you could, Shauntae, take us away. It's time to get started.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Katherine, for the introduction, and thank you all for taking time out of your Friday afternoon on the last Friday of June. So for those of us who haven't been teaching, we know that when July comes around, it's almost over. So thank you so much. So I'm going to talk a little bit about building bridges, community-centered approaches to inclusive education in challenging times. And as I was preparing this, sometimes I think like, well, this is so basic. But one of the things in my role in faculty development and for the in faculty development and for my college is we can't always assume that everyone knows and or is doing. And sometimes I have had the benefit of learning like, oh, I do that. And it actually is kind of a meaningful thing. I might not have had a name or a technique to go along with it, but this is really important. So if you do all of these strategies, hats off to you. You know that you're on the right track. Maybe you do some. I think it's communication scholars. Communication professors in the classroom. We probably tend to focus on trying to establish a community more than maybe another discipline. But I just want to make sure that we encourage everyone to do that with some intentionality. So at least for my presentation, we are just going too fast, is just talk a little bit about the original intent of DEI. So we know that that's under assault right now. And how can we still do DEI without using the terminology? So I don't know at my institution, and I do actually teach at an HBCU, and we have a state legislature that absolutely loves everything that has gone on in our board of governors. And so we've had to scrape and erase things from our website that is reflective of anything in terms of these words. So maybe you all are at institutions that you had to do that as well. So we could get rid of the word, but that doesn't mean that we have to get rid of the behavior. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then I'll just discuss some practical strategies to implement in the classroom. And I know we'll have an opportunity to do that even more so later in the presentation. All right, so just looking at the original intent, some of the core principles is we really just wanted to make sure that all students learn and succeed. So that's everybody. So that's the inclusion. And we're creating environments where everyone really feels valued. So I want you to succeed, but I really can't expect a great expectation of you succeeding if you don't feel valued or a sense of belonging in the classroom. And then, of course, DEI was established to address some systemic barriers to education. So we get students who are in higher education, but there's something, if they make it to higher education, but even then, there's some inequity that's going on and that we all have seen. And then, of course, part of DEI is promoting critical thinking and perspective taking. So that is what we actually want to do, and we want to encourage that, but we can't necessarily use that language. But we are communication scholars. So if anybody can come up with ways to reframe those words in the behavior, then that's one of the things that we want to do. So the first thing is really kind of reframing those hot button words. So I know from my board of governors, the words that they're looking for that we can't include. But at the end of the day, what it is that we were trying to get at in terms of behavior is student success, right? And so even though we are talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we want all students to succeed for all learners. And then the student-centered support focuses on individual needs. So that's the equity. So I don't have to say equity or use that word, but I am trying to address everyone's needs, and everybody has a different need in terms of how they're going to get to the success. In terms of that inclusion, we talk about belonging. So we're really highlighting community building and highlighting collections and belonging. And how do we do that in the classroom? And then building classroom community, relationship building focus. And then finally, that diversity is having varied perspectives. So academic framing of different viewpoints. So all of those things really kind of summarize those three letters that are now things that we can't talk about, but we can actually still do the work. So we can, oops, oh, I need to press one more time. Okay, we can reframe, but we also actually need to do the work. So here are just a few things. So again, you could already be doing these things, but just a few things to make sure that if you are, to continue, if you're not, to start, but to do it with some intentionality. All right, so demonstrating care in building authentic relationships. And again, these are things that we often think like, well, everybody does this. And again, when I moved into a leadership position, I realized like, no, everybody doesn't do this. But let me just say that we really have to make sure that we are present and available. So that's just not office hours. And I'm not one into, not that you shouldn't physically be present, but I do think that students need to have some type of access. And your response time is quick enough for them to be able to do the work. So I know when I taught online, I haven't taught online for a long time, but I would have a lot of non-traditional, or well, they were non-traditional students who were working, and maybe they set aside this particular time to do something. And if you don't respond to them, then those 2 hours that they set aside is all for naught. So they can't move forward. So just making sure that we are present and available. So that sounds like a simple thing, but all of those go into the authentic relationship. So making sure that our response time is appropriate. And for you, we can have boundaries, but we want to make sure that it is also something that's of benefit to the students and that you are accessible. And now, even the fact that we have so many ways for students to access us, it's not necessarily that you're physically in your office, but we have to communicate those things. So the presence and availability is really important. Individual recognition, so learning people's names. And when we have names that are different or hard to pronounce, I might tell students, it's going to take me about 3 weeks to get this, or I might continue to ask, or I just apologize up front. It's going to take me a minute. I need to learn how to pronounce that, but just work with me to do that. So I'm acknowledging that, yeah, I'm struggling with your name, but I'm not going to avoid calling on you. Or I'm not going to, if you, and sometimes students will offer, you can call me so-and-so, but I'll say, but what's your preference? So hopefully we already do that. And then acknowledging student backgrounds and experiences when that is appropriate. So we got to recognize that everybody is not coming from the same point, the same class, the same worldview, just the same anything. So there really is diversity. And so when we have opportunities to learn students, we definitely want to take that. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Offering academic support. So scaffolding learning. So that's something that's been a hot topic for a number of years. So we break things down. So when I was in college 100 years ago, you give the assignment, you say this is the due date, right? And it wasn't necessarily broken down. So we want to make sure that we're breaking down things for students to do in chunk sizes. And of course, even with, and this is not an AI discussion, but that helps us to be able to control some of that as well as we're doing things, just to make sure that students have a clear understanding of what it is that they're talking about and have an opportunity to correct things. So for us, we might have turned in, the term paper at the end, and that was the grade. But when we have steps to get to that, that's helpful for the students and it also is helpful for us. And providing clear expectations as well as feedback. I have a daughter who is in a summer school now, and she's like, I didn't get a good grade, but it wasn't a lot of feedback. Well, that's not really helpful, right? So I didn't get a good grade. Yeah, it was a rubric, but I'm not really sure what it is. So we want to make sure that we're providing clear expectations as well as feedback. And again, these are things that we all should be doing and we might do to some of us do better than others. And then sometimes it requires for us to pivot. So I'll just share this real quick example. I teach media law, and I had just a really terrible class in the fall, and they all actually loved me. When I looked at the SRIs, they were like, we love this class. And I was like, I was really counting down to when this was going to be over. But they they actually, oh, I lost my train of thought of what I was going to share with that. Never mind. That was going to be a good story, but I can't remember what I was going to say. But you just have to be flexible in terms of what it is that you are doing. So providing that. All right. And then a personal investment. So showing genuine interest in your students, in their growth and their success. So genuine interest. So you do stop. So one of the things that I do is I really try to be in the classroom before the class starts so I can welcome the students in. So I'm not rushing in and I'm trying to set up. I like to have everything set up when they actually come in. And then I can just say for anybody who shows up early, just to have a few minutes to connect with them. So all of those are small things that we can do in terms of relationship building. And I really can't remember because it was going to be a good example of what I was going to say with that class, but I am sorry for that. All right, it's perimenopausal. All right, so creating psychological safety is making sure that all of us are carrying some types of mask, all of us. And so we want to be able to make an environment that our students feel comfortable kind of lowering the mask. So we want to make sure that we create a classroom climate that establishes norms of respectful dialogue. And I know we're going to cover that a little bit later. And we're going to talk about being vulnerable even with us. So appropriate self-disclosure and admitting when you don't know something. I have a late faculty search going on now, and I'm in a mass communication department, and it was for journalism and / media advisor. And so one of the candidates didn't have a really strong background in the technology in terms of laying out a paper or, whatever it is. I'm not in that. And so one of my colleagues said, yeah, but the students would be able to sense that, and they would kind of eat her alive. And I was like, why do we have to pretend? So you say she's really good in this, but she says, hey, I'm learning. I have a learning curve going on right now. I'm learning right along with you. So if we kind of admit to students when we don't know something or we're learning something, that kind of gives them permission to lower the mask as well. So we don't always have to have the we are the authority. And then making a mistake-friendly environment. So framing errors as learning opportunities. And we're novice at this point, they're novice learners. And so they should have the freedom to feel like I can make a mistake and that's okay. And that's what we learn. So, and your mistake is no different than somebody else's. So we probably all are struggling with that. And then of course, we want to make sure that we're culturally responsive. So acknowledging and valuing diverse perspectives and experiences. So we talked a little bit about that earlier. Okay. Yep. Oops. So one of the things that I have talked about, and I have to be kind of careful with this, but you all can Google this, because it really comes from K-12. So Kagan structure. So really focused on K-12, and it's about they provide specific structured ways for students to interact with content and each other. And I just say careful because they say you really can't go out and train on Kagan if you haven't been certified for that. But we have been using Kagan structures at my institution for a number of years. And when we go to the Kagan workshops, we are the only higher education institution there, but the structures actually work. So even though they might have been designed for a middle schooler or a high schooler, they actually do work. So it's a very structured way of covering content, but even before you cover the content, you use that same structure as class building or team building. And so one of the things for anyone, I just saw that we were accepted for a short course, and we're going to talk about that in November. So definitely check that out. So the structures provide, again, structured ways for students to interact with content as well as each other. So for example, um, one of the bases of this is really having pies is making sure that you have positive interaction. So it's something that you've established that kind of friendly and welcoming environment, and there's some strategies for that. Having individual accountability, meaning everybody in the team has to do something. So for instance, I do teach media law, and I work in teams of 4. And so there's a senior partner, a junior partner, or a managing partner. There's a scribe, somebody to record. So everybody has a particular role. So individual accountability, equal participation. So if everybody has a role, that means we all are participating. And even when we are answering a question, I no longer just do what do you all think and wait for one person to discuss. So the goal is to have 25% of the class discussing at one time. So in those pie groups, one person is talking, and you can cover a lot more. Now, that was kind of hard for me because I wanted to know what everybody thought, but I don't necessarily have time to go and do that. But it is an opportunity for everyone to participate at one time, and there's simultaneous interaction. So some of the structures that it might be mixed freeze group. So this is class building. So creating random groups to break down social barriers. So that could be random. So we don't know how that's going to do. Then we have class building questions. So structured sharing that builds connections across differences. And sometimes we get some resistance in higher ed. So I don't have time for that. I only have 70 minutes or 75 minutes, or I only have 50 minutes. I usually try to do some of this at least every time I change groups, and I'm going to change groups at least 3 different times in the semester. So an opportunity for them to have some class building as well as team building. And so when they are in their teams, we have team formation, and I usually control the team. So I usually try to do a high functioning learner with a lower and then 2 mid in the middle. So I control the teams because, of course, all the time students are like, I want to pick my own team. And sometimes I allow them to do that. But when we get ready for the structures, I'm very intentional about how I want the teams to run. And then find someone who. So that could be at the beginning of the semester, find someone who is the same birth order as you. So I'm an only child, so I've had to find somebody else. But I've also used it with content. And this is an example of how you can use it with content is we covered uh, sources of law in the last time. So now I need to find someone who can tell me what constitutional law is. So again, these are things that you can use for them to interact with each other, but also to learn the content. So I might do a find someone who and it gets people up. I'm into moving. So no longer are we sitting in just the desk the whole 75 minutes. So we might do that to say that's a review. So instead of saying, well, who can remember what the 5 sources of law are, I say, let's get up and do this. And that's a good review. And then finally, some team building within diverse groups is team identity. So now I'm a part of the team. So, and we have teams that for the law firm, they'll come up with their own name for the law firm. For other classes, you might come up with chance or something like that. I talked about the roles and responsibilities, and then I always have a team reflection. So how did the team function and work? And it helps them to really think about, how do I work within this? So what was difficult for me? Who were the slackers, or who were the leaders? And so having some questions to help them think, and that's helping them think about how the team is functioning, but also hopefully helping them to think about how they function in a team. And then of course, some conflict resolution skills. So we established that all up front. So again, these are just examples of things that we probably, I thought that was the end, probably already do, and then some academic structures. Most of us are probably familiar with the think, pair, share. So I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to give you think time. I'm going to turn to your partner to talk, and then we share. And so again, that's a thing that takes out, I don't have to be, it's very easy, or it feels better to be wrong with a group of 4 or one other person than by yourself. So that's creating that belonging. Numbered heads together, that means as a team, you're competing not against each other, but you're helping each other to find. So for instance, with that one, I might ask a content question, and everybody in the team has to figure out what the answer is, and I use a spinner to see who it is. So number 2 is the one that's going to answer. So they don't know who's going to answer, but that means that we have to work together to make sure that whoever is called on, they have an answer for that. So just an example of that. Simultaneous roundtable is equal participation. So maybe we're brainstorming, but instead of you all just saying, go brainstorm, you say, we're going to start with 1 and we're going to go around 2 times or something. And then a 3-step interview is just the deep listening. And again, having that perspective sharing across different. So really creating opportunities in the classroom to break down. And that can't come from just lecture. That can't come from just working in groups without giving them some sort of structure. And that, I keep thinking, I'm sorry, I know this has to be the last one. So practical strategies are definitely the first week of foundation. So setting an inclusive tone for the first day. those weekly rituals. So really quickly, I might have these talking chips that we might do every Tuesday to start the week out. And it might say something like, who's a famous person I don't know. It's a number of questions. But we take, again, a lot of times the higher ed people are like, I don't have time for that. But all it takes is 2 minutes because you're working within a team of 4. So everybody goes around and they get to answer this. So that's one thing that I do. Assignment modification. So again, that's that equity. So I'm incorporating choice and cultural relevance. One of the things that I teach is a layered curriculum where students have voice and choice. It does require for me to create various assignments from which they can choose, but they have a voice and a choice in what it is. And then maybe instead of giving them a particular person to read, you say these are the parameters and they come up with their own person. And hopefully it will be somebody that's from a diverse perspective. And then, of course, and part of the layered curriculum of the voice and choice is your multiple ways to demonstrate learning. So that addresses the equity in there. All right, I think this really is the last one. Yes. All right. So Michael, you are up.
Wonderful. Thank you, Shauntae. I really appreciate, especially the focus on the interactions with students. I think that was definitely something that I may have overlooked in my presentation and preparing for today. And I want to build off of that by thinking of some of the strategies. Let me just say thanks to the organizers. Thank you, Katherine Thweatt, for putting this VLO together and inviting me to be part of it. So I'll just begin by describing how I come to this learning opportunity, especially with regard to how we're under threat, or the possibilities that we can move sort of beyond this idea of racial experience that was set out for us. So I'm trying the remote control here. There we go. If you all remember the SFA 2023 case, which preceded a lot of what's happening now, the move to eliminate DEI in higher education, I think started with this 2023 court case where the University of North Carolina was sued by the Students for Fair Admissions. And I'm sorry, you probably hear the background music. I'm in a coffee shop. The one thing that I want to point out about this, and I'll read you the quote from Justice Roberts, is that he stated that nothing in this opinion should be construed as prohibiting universities from considering an applicant's discussion of how race has affected his or her life, be it through discrimination, inspiration, or otherwise. However, the focus on the individual experience really is a way to sidestep the institution's responsibility for protecting our students. As I thought through this problem, I kept on thinking, like, there's not just what our own individual experiences are as learners and as teachers, and what are the experiences of what's happening on a national scale with policy, but there's so much that our institutions are responsible for, and how much we are responsible within our institutions, that I think that this is where I come from today. So as I start with thinking about Justice Roberts' position and how we reduce systematic oppression to personal stories, it makes me think of what the scholar Dylan Robinson writes in his book called Hungry Listening. The idea of hungry listening is how oftentimes the stories of difference, or the stories of how individuals are affected by particular racial structures or particular gender, other structures that are presented as inequity in our societies, often gets reduced to, well, just tell me your story. Your story matters. Your story becomes part of this institutional narrative of diversity, and how narrative, or how that narrative is maybe a rainbow of the perspectives of the collage of people. And I think what this often does is it reduces the individual effects of, I should say, the collective effects of these multiple individual traumas that institutions and our society has on people into these problems that we can solve through coalition. Unfortunately, this is not the case, and it feels like as we push towards moving away from policies that are eliminating DEI, or we want to find ways to like protect students, especially in precarious positions, my hope is that we can build strategies around the institutions that don't make us just perform authenticity, but allow us to really conceptualize a space of learning that I believe has a potential for what I call, and what Arturo Escobar calls, pluriversal possibilities. And I'll talk about that towards the end of my presentation here. So I wanted to address this on 3 levels. Our learning opportunities, or our learning outcomes here really are thinking about how we can engage maybe with students in a way how we can engage with our institutions, but then at a third level, thinking about public pedagogy and what is it that our responsibilities are as, in many ways, public academics to take these strategies beyond just our classrooms and institutions. But I'll start with some classroom strategies. And for me, um, I firmly believe in that our roles are not limited to this sort of knowledge production, but we have a very material place in our societies. I work at the University of New Mexico, for example. There's a history within New Mexico of colonial occupation, of displacement of indigenous peoples. There's a history of environmental destruction. There's a number of practices that are linked to the university that, for better or for worse, are part of the legacy that we inherit when we work at the institutions. I find that encouraging my students to learn about the institutions that they're working at really helps motivate some of these conversations around equity, responsibility that aren't just given to us by what the national conversations might be about equity and race and justice, but about what are some of the material impacts that us, by belonging to the institutions we belong at, can see as materially impacting the lives of our community members, lives of students, the lives of those in our environments who are being stressed by the presence of our institution. One of these examples I'll give you is when I was a graduate student at the University of Denver. I was also employed at the English Language Center, the Language Learning Center. And interestingly enough, employees of the university who were working with facilities management, largely language learners, second language Spanish speakers, were interested in taking courses that they were given free, but there was no courses available to them during the operating hours. We worked with these individuals to find some times outside of like the 8 to 5 schedule for English classes, where then they could eventually advance into the English courses, and they could get degrees. Just having these kinds of like institutional conversations of ways we can work around particular barriers allows us to see how our institutional practices might keep certain groups excluded from participating in those kinds of benefits. I also say here that we can map the material conditions, and I failed to mention that this is really about not only historical exclusion, but about the futures of our university. My university, for example, has a 2040 vision for strategic planning in ways that incorporate things like community engagement and the environment. So how do we use our skills as practitioners? How do we ask our students to use their skills as learners of communication? And I'm in a communication and journalism program, to apply those skills to then turn the lens back into the things that we do here at the university. I've had students, for example, do investigative reporting about where our budget investments are that eventually spur small changes in dialogues on campus. And this for me is really important. These are ways that we can encourage our students to turn their attention back onto what our universities are doing. I also think this is a really an important perspective when we think about working with graduate students. Oftentimes our graduate students are looking for things to study. I can't tell you how many times as a reviewer, or as somebody who is on multiple dissertation committees, is that I want our students to find things outside of like popular media, or outside of things that are within their zone of comfort, and look for the things that are within their community to find as areas of research. And this might be an opportunity to do that, is to find ways to guide our graduate students into thinking of like how the impacts of our societies or our institutions materially affect our communities, and turning that into a research project. I say here, when considering what our structures are doing, we often have to consider that it's these opportunities, what Katherine de Almeida describes as waste landships, where in moments of crisis, in moments where communities are being affected disproportionately, that we find opportunities to come together and build community around those particular relationships that are being threatened. We see this often happening with like natural disasters, or we saw this, of course, happening during COVID, when external forces push us together to find strategies. This might be a way for us to consider how our own collective threat might be also an opportunity for communities of color, but any communities being affected by these structures, to mobilize in solidarity. The next level that I want to describe is how we might think about systemic change at the institutional level. for me, thinking about communication strategies, especially as communication practitioners, for us to think about what our relationships are with the institutions we work at is essential. I describe in some of my research this land body language assemblage of how we can understand what it is about the particular language that we use that connects us to the places that we work and live at. And of course, we all work and live in different areas of Turtle Island. Maybe some of us are joining from outside of this continent, and that would be amazing. But all of us have a very unique responsibility to that specific place that we are at, and understanding how to incorporate this language into our syllabi, into our research, into the way we engage with our students, I think really, really matters. I also think that like when we think about a study of the institution, we can talk about what it is that happens that some people might describe as microaggressions, or some people might describe as unspoken norms within groups. Gloria Saldua describes it as intimate terrorism, how academic spaces can produce these kinds of antagonisms between people. And building trust within communities isn't easy, but I feel that if we can understand why institutions might produce these kinds of behaviors, perhaps this is a way for us to focus our research on the institution. We can also think about like decision-making processes at administrative levels or at department levels, and what communication practices are happening, and what are the kinds of cultural aspects of our society that oftentimes I think prevent us from doing the truly democratic work that we set out to do. And again, for those interested in investments, and I appreciate like Shauntae's approach towards like the legal mechanisms of DEI. We can understand how our own institutions are implementing these economic and political legal practices. It would be beneficial for us then to have a language then to work on our institutions when we have that opportunity. I guess knowing the institution better and understanding the institution will allow us, and I think will allow our students to have a better toolkit for making those changes when necessary. And then finally, I think that our understanding of what the institution's role is in the community is really important. I think that, for example, like what are group accountability practices? What if like the communities around the institution filled out surveys instead of like just asking our students to fill out individual surveys for our performance? What if we ask our communities to dialogue with us about what are we doing in our practices? What ways, for example, can we offer an opportunity to bring more people from the community onto our campuses to share in some of the resources that we benefit from? These practices refer or might point to what some refer to as polite looting, the idea that we owe it to our communities to take the resources, to take the knowledge production and the profits from the knowledge production that happens at these institutions and deliver them back into these communities. And not just, you know, the people of the communities, but also thinking about protecting our land and waterways as we move into the next generation. This is going to be extremely important. And finally, I think that where I'd like to finish just describing my work is how our responsibilities to the public as well. Sarah Ahmed describes, and I borrow this ethic of like, while we work at the university, we also need to be working on the university. And this means that for those of us who have like connections to land grant universities or to have corporate connections, what does it mean to live in a world where you stand up against those on paper, but then you also make an earning from those institutions? I think there's a way for us to consolidate and to be more practical with what our ethics are. I think that this has been one of the primary drivers of my research, is to think about why is there such a lack of access to knowledge that's been produced through universities and academic resources? Why is it still so expensive to publish in open access journals? Why is it still so expensive to translate research into other languages other than English? All of these barriers that produce a kind of a gate between who can and can't know things is something that we should be addressing as field scholars. So again, how we make our research more accessible, not just in terms of being able to touch it and grasp it, but then what is it that we're doing in our translation of research that can be practically applied in our communities, I think is really important. I think that I've already mentioned politely looting and training our students how to politely loot is going to be really important as we move forward in the future. And I'll just end, like I said, the pluriversal knowledge system that Arturo Escobar has described in his research allows us to think that rather than universalizing our approaches, for example, as much as I appreciate this learning opportunity, I can tell you that not everything that you will learn today is going to be applicable in your institution. We all work with very different students. We all work in very different environments. But the hope is that we can understand that we come from these different places and that maybe our shared knowledges can teach us about how we can do better here, where you can do better there. And that's really, I think, the goal is not to create a universalized way of knowing, but to really honor and respect each people in each place where they learn and how when we come into those spaces as new faculty or as graduate students or as administrators, our goal is to listen and learn from that space and then try to honor the knowledge that's being produced there. So I just want to say, like, I got into this business because of the ideas, the sharing of ideas, the capacity to build and dream together. And I think that should be something that is at the heart of everything that I do. And maybe if we want to build a better collaborative community together, maybe we invest more in the awe and wonder of this work, because I feel like that's where we can truly find the creative power to move beyond the structures that we already know. If we only reproduce the colonial structure, then we're not going to really move beyond them. But I think that uncertainty can be productive in its way, and I hope that each of you can really lean into that and wonder. So thank you again for the opportunity to share my ideas today.
Thank you, Michael. We'll move on to Angela.
All right. Welcome. Welcome. Deeply grateful to be in this space. You'll notice that the PowerPoint went down. I'm going to encourage all of you to participate in such a way that creates and contributes to the kind of experience that you want to have. We're going to show the kind of vulnerability with each other that we want our students to show. My name is Angela Kariotis. I'm the Director of Transformative Learning at Brookdale Community College. And I dropped some links in the chat because the work that I'm representing is the work that I do with the Engaged Pedagogy Faculty Working Group. Oh, Katherine. So this is going to be an interactive space. We're going to contribute and we're going to see what happens. One of the things the first thing that I'll say is the idea of how do you communicate to your students that everyone is welcome in your classroom? And is everyone welcome in your classroom? Is everyone welcome in our classrooms? Sometimes when students go to college, they're getting introduced to ideas that they've never been introduced to before. Ideas that you're teaching them about the way the world works, that they're hearing for the first time, that these are going to be in direct conflict with some of what they've learned from their families, home, neighborhood, school. And they deserve a kind of care too, when they're learning for the first time about other folk, the reality of things, learning from the first time from you. And a few things happen without care. They'll stay committed to that rigid status quo that's not of service, that is harmful. Or they'll retreat into a debilitating apathy or a depression. So your care and your patience as being the first person to introduce these very new ideas about the world and their place in it, there's a space for that too. 3 items we're going to practice with each other. We're going to embody strategies of what it is to navigate, facilitate, welcome conflict in the classroom. Conflict as generative. And we're going to see what that feels like with each other. It's one thing to understand, to hear about, or to read about strategies, or even to see other people doing these things. But unless you practice at Brookdale, the Engaged Pedagogy Faculty Working Group, we meet weekly and we practice so we could build our muscle memory, build our capacity to try something new in the classroom. Because for those of us who've been teaching for 25 years, it may take practice to break old habits and to do something new. And the vulnerability will also come to tell your students that you're going to try something new for the first time. And to get good at anything is going to require practice. Never be in a state of emergency. When facilitating difficult discussion, managing conflict, generative conflict in the classroom, do not be in a state of emergency. Your nervous system is contagious. When you're in a state of emergency, your students will be in a state of emergency too. How not to be in a state of emergency? You're prepared, you're flexible, you practice with your colleagues, people like this that are on this call, and you build your capacity to withstand uncertainty. You can create space for students and perspectives without agreeing or condoning those ideas. I'm going to say that again, because a lot of times we want to create space for divergent perspectives and not to be in a state of emergency and to build your capacity for uncertainty. You don't know what those perspectives are going to be. You can create space for divergent and diverse perspectives without agreeing or condoning what those perspectives are. So let's practice. My question to you is, and I'm going to ask you right now, can you get a little piece of paper, the back of an envelope, a paper towel, something to write on, crayon, marker, pen, and keep that near you. So and after everything that we do, I'm going to spend 10 seconds for you to take notes. And the point of that is for you to maybe remember and be able to recall some of the things that we talk about and do in our fresh time together. So my first question to you is, do you have an opening ritual? So Dr. White, in her amazing presentation, talked about weekly rituals, the idea of rituals, and rituals get people ready for the learning. So what is your opening ritual? So just take 10 seconds here. Just write down, I never thought about an opening ritual. I haven't thought about the way that I start class, or this is what I do to signal that we're going to get ready for the learning. This is what I do to get everybody somatically ready for the space. So we're going to do a ritual with each other. Pet, plant, person. I'm challenging all of you to bring a pet, a plant, or a person in your square. And those of you who have your cameras off, that's all right. You could fill the camera with your pet, plant, or person. Look at me, I'm getting up. So I'm going to bring a pet, a plant, or a person, and I'm going to bring it into the space. A pet, a plant, or a oh, look, everybody. Look at this. Look at this pet. Oh, you know what? Oh my goodness. This is amazing. This is a beautiful, 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 beautiful. Welcome. Take a look at everybody. Pictures are welcome. Amazing. Take it in. Beautiful. Let's return our beloveds. Let's return our beloveds. That's great. When you bond with people in such a way and create a little bit of joy and some commonalities across each other, that will help the relationships when we get to the tougher moments, because we're going to get to tougher moments. Beautiful. Now, I want everybody, just go like this, closed fist, tight, tight, tight. Just as hard as you can. And then open up this next hand. And with this open hand, do your best to pry this fist open. Do your best to pry this fist open. So you can stop looking at me and do your best to pry it open. And then stop here So just type in the chat. What did you feel this fist doing? Just drop it in the chat. Resisting, resisting, clenching, resistance, resist, 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 resist. Let's try again. Closed fist, super tight, like a closed mind. And this is you, the other end. And just rest. And take a deep breath here. And just rest. And a little bit of love. And shake out the sweat. And wipe your palms on your pants. And drop it in the chat. What did you feel this fist doing? Just drop it in the chat. What happened here? Relaxing, relax, soften, protected, release, just a little. And that's what it means when we say meet people where they are. That's what it feels like. I want you to write down for 5 seconds, what kind of somatic work do you bring into your class? Even if it's just everybody take a breath, or we've been sitting for an hour and a half, stretch in your chair, or get up and walk from one end of the room to the other, or whatever it might be. Write down 5 seconds. How do you bring the body into the learning? Just 5 seconds. So that's one example of a somatic exercise, because when you're dealing with elevated heart rates and red in the face and challenge and uncertainty, that's the body. People shutting down or people getting defensive, or that's all the body. So before any difficult generative conflict, how do you bring the body into the space? Beautiful, beautiful. We have some things in here. Next, 6-word story. We're all going to write 6-word stories today. Dr. Lois, I feel, is shaking her head. Maybe you have written many of Hemingway's 6-word stories. Baby shoes, for sale, never worn. One of the first and most famous 6-word stories. We want to bring the outside world into our classroom. You never want to say, how do you feel about that? Because I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. Not because I don't care or I don't know it. Like, I just don't know how I feel. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel. I don't know what I'm supposed to think. I really don't know what's going on. And a 6-word story allows the beginning of a larger conversation. Newspaper headlines. We all want to bring, some of us want to bring the outside world into our classroom. You can't not. So let's write a 6-word story about a very current newspaper headline, and I'm going to guide you through it. Here's the newspaper headline, and I want you to write one story in 6 words about what bubbles up for you. Supreme Court limits lower courts' ability, narrows nationwide injunctions. That's the headline from today. I'm going to read it again. Supreme Court limits lower courts' ability, narrows nationwide injunctions. Some of you may know exactly what I'm talking about. You could Google it if we've not heard it. I want you to write a story in 6 words about what bubbles up for you. Don't overthink it. Get out of your head. Okay. And we're not going to critique the stories. We're just going to listen to them. Can I have maybe 3 people write stack in the chat? And that lets me know that you're willing to turn on your mic and share your 6-word story. So if you could just write stack in the chat. Okay, thank you, Deidre. I'm looking for 2 more people. I'm looking for 1 more person. Okay, we have our 3 people. So Deidre first, then Misty, then Shauntae. You will unmute one at a time and just read your 6-word story. Whenever you're ready, Deidre.
Big brother chokes the little people.
Misty.
He dies to favor very few.
Your mic went out. I'm going to ask you to present that one more time.
Are you able to hear? Democracy dies to favor very few.
Shauntae.
I'm afraid of losing protection.
Let's all take a deep breath here. And exhale. And thank you, Jasmine. Drop it in the chat if you want to share. And it gives people an opportunity to react and reflect without having to carry the responsibility of saying any more. And it provides people a moment to think about what they think about the thing. What is conflict? I want you to write in the chat, but don't press enter. Do not press enter. One word in the chat. What is conflict? Do not press enter. You're going to write one word in the chat. I see you, Dr. White. Yes. What is conflict? Deeply grateful for everyone who turned on their mic and shared those 6-word stories. So is everybody 6-word? Oh no. Oh, I didn't. Now you know that that happens when you do 2 thumbs up. Everybody has their, all right. What is conflict? Press enter. Let's take a look. Flaw, disagreement, tension, sadness, movement, flawed, unavoidable, difficult, pressure, difference without understanding, opposition, struggle. Boom. We're going to end on Donna's, an opportunity. Conflict is always an opportunity. When you are setting the stage for generative conflict, you're going to tell your students exactly that. Now is our conflict moment. Let them know. Now we're going to disagree. And I want to ask all of you, what might we win if we disagreed well? Ask your students that. What might we win if we disagreed well? Because not having conflict, we know, is not the goal. That means there are still issues that are unattended. What might we win if we disagreed well? I'm going to ask you to drop it in the chat. Each other. Knowledge. What might we win if we disagreed well? Beautiful. So for 5 seconds here, I want you to just jam on 2 different things. How might you integrate 6-word stories into your classroom time? And what is your relationship to conflict? And I'm just like moving through it because I have 1 more minute with you. But I want you to remember some of the things that we talked about and did. So how might you integrate 6-word stories? What is your relationship to conflict? And just to take advantage of my last minute with you, instead of a conversation, how about a listening session? People are going to tell you all the time to have a conversation. How about a listening session? Story circles are an amazing structure. 6 people in each circle, 1 minute each, literally having a stopwatch so you know how much time you have left. When your time runs out, the talking stops. The person speaking must stop, and there is no crosstalk. And that relieves any responsibility for continuing the story. If you're done in 30 seconds, we're going to sit there for another 30 seconds in total silence. So here's just one general question, and I'll let you know the prompt. We won't have time to practice it because I'm going to be out of time, but you might consider it for your classroom, for your people, right? Is there someone with whom you disagree but still love? And just think about that. And I'm gonna give you one more. What was the experience that shaped you, your view of the world, and your politics in it? And the goal of these questions is not to find what people believe, but why people believe it. And the goal, the power of the prompt is, so for me, a lot of my conversation too, because I work with police and policing, is always going to be about gun and gun violence. But a terrible question would be, do you believe in the Second Amendment, or do you believe in having a gun in the house? But a different prompt is something like, do you want to protect your family? And wanting to protect your family might be why you don't want a gun in the house. And you wanting to protect your family might be why you do want to have a gun in the house. But now we have the shared values. We have something in common here. We both want to protect our families. But the way that we go about it is radically different. But unearthing those shared values is going to be able is going to give us the opportunity for us to be in principal disagreements, where we're not trying to annihilate each other or have fake peace because of passivity. Anyhow, that's my time. I overplanned, and these are my notes, and I'm not gonna have enough time to do everything, but I wish everybody a deep, deep gratitude. And I want everybody to just take a deep breath. So just please take a deep breath with me and exhale out. Thank you for being here with me and with each other. And I know that somehow I'll be able to bring the plants into a different workshop in a different frame, and I'll get through the next page of my over planning. Thank you, Katherine, for having me, and thank you to my panel mates.
Well, I want to say thank you to all of you. Thank you to Shauntae. Thank you to Michael. Thank you to Angela. What I really, really loved about all of your presentations is that I got to feel like a student again. So thank you so much. What I really loved, Shauntae, about what you did is you put some names into some labels on what we can do in the classroom. And you provided us with an opportunity to learn about some really communal things that we can do with our students. Michael, you have given me some ideas and concepts that I was very unfamiliar with, and many on this call may be unfamiliar with. And then Angela, oh my gosh, you said we need to think about some things, but gosh, you made me feel so many things. So I'm going to be thinking about those feelings and feeling those feelings for quite some time. You made me feel really good. All of you did today. So thank you very much. I'm going to open up this for our Q&A session. But I want to remind you again that at the end of this presentation, there will be an opportunity to provide feedback. And I know all of our presenters and NCA would also be very appreciative of your feedback today. So let's just open it up to questions. So pop your questions into the chat or raise your hands and I will try to get to you. Going to put it on gallery view so I can see your hands coming up. And if I don't see your hand, just jump in. I'm not seeing a hand. Oh, someone's asking how we can access the recording.
I can answer that question. Hi, my name is Rachel.
Oh, thank you, Rachel.
Yeah, no problem. I'm a staff member at the national office and project lead for our monthly VLOs. The recording link will be posted on our website, and I will also email it to all registrants directly. So you will have it hopefully within 2 weeks. That's usually our goal and timeline for that.
Great. And yes, let's do record the Q&A as well. Thank you, Rachel.
No problem.
Okay, I'm looking for hands.
There's a question in the chat.
Oh gosh, okay, let's see.
From
Regarding
Derek.
presentation 1, I teach at a community college with increasing numbers of running start students, how to encourage more conversation and sense of their being empowered to talk and interact. Shauntae?
Let me just understand what a running start student is?
Yeah, sorry. These are usually high school students that have gotten the chance to start college early, so they're taking classes while they're going to high school, finishing up.
Gotcha. Early college. My daughter did that. So is your fear that maybe the conversation might be inappropriate, or they're, interacting with people who are older than them, or what?
I think often it is the age thing between me being the instructor in my late 50s and a number of students that would be closer to my age. And then suddenly if there's 10 or 15 of them that are 16 or 17 years old, I feel like they're, rather inhibited despite my hopefully gentle trying to encourage them to express their opinions and what they feel about the course materials and what we're doing and things like that. So
Oh, okay. Gotcha. So I definitely incorporate um, interaction very early on. So they kind of know that they're going to be talking. One thing that I do is, as Angela was raising, what do I do as a ritual? They're going to come in and I have music playing. So that's the first thing. We're going to give the overview of the day. And I make sure that there is at least one time in all classes where we're going to get up and move in some type of way or to talk. So that doesn't seem so weird. Like I didn't talk for 3 weeks and now you want me to turn to the person and talk. But we're going to do that every day, even if it's just a review, even if it's just a question that piques your interest. But I think one of the things it could be that you could use are those questions that I was talking about. So we call class building, which has nothing to do with content. So class building is really just a random question. When I have them in their groups of like 4, I might be like, the first person to go is the one who got up the earliest or stayed up the latest. And usually that generates some conversation in terms of understanding or of who the people are. So I think that if you kind of incorporate that frequently, it doesn't have to be long, because I said the higher ed people are always like, I don't have time for that. I only have this much time, but it could just be a couple of minutes out of each class that this is how we're going to start, or that there's going to be a break in those 50 or 75 minutes where we're going to do that. Does that help a little bit?
yes, thank you.
Because I think that there's diversity in age. I mean, so that is a form of diversity. So the 16-year-old's value and opinion is just as important as the 46-year-old.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was a great question. And now we have another one from Lois Einhorn. I'm about 2 weeks away from having a book published, Sandy Hook Tribute, Where Have All the Children Gone? It's bringing up strong reaction, even from friends. Do you have any suggestions on how to prepare myself? And namaste to all the presenters.
Maybe I can help just by starting to speak to this, considering I talked a little bit about public pedagogy. In the classroom and outside of the classroom, we are trained, I think, to have really hard conversations and be experts in those conversations. And not just whatever it is the topic matter, but have a particular expertise in delivering tough messages to people. And I would say lean into that, really lean into your capacity as a professional in this industry to say, I understand that this causes a bit of a situation. I think so many of what Angela's like questions around how do we talk about conflict really matter here, but just maintaining the confidence in yourself that as a professional you have that ability and start from that position, especially with people who are close to you. You can say, this is something that of course I feel a lot about, but I also I want to believe that these are the things I've been trained to talk about, and do it in that way.
Thank you, Michael. Any other thoughts from Angela or Shauntae? Angela.
Sure. To create some space at the beginning and at the end. So the way that we open that conversation and the way also that we close it, to create closure doesn't mean that we're ending it, but we're ending it for right now. What closure during that class period, what that will do is get people ready to move out of that space and into the next one. And the next thing that I'll say is give people a place to put all that energy, because you're 2 weeks away from that series of lessons and you're going to introduce it and then you will be done with it. But if it's bringing up strong reactions and feelings, people are still going to want to be in it. So what might you provide to say, if this is bringing up strong emotion, energy, you want to learn more about this, you want to show up for this, you want to make this into part of your awareness or advocacy or whatever it might be. Here's a list of places that you can go to. Here's what other groups are doing. Here's who you could follow on social media. Here's some of the movements that you could be involved. So people can direct their energies into a next level piece if it's moving them to do so in that way.
Thank you, Angela. All right, we have another question. A question for Michael. Is there a way to invite student narratives about their experience without being in the position of the hungry listener or colonizing appropriator of trauma? Structural analysis is awesome, but inviting students to connect personally, also important, that affective dimension.
Sorry, thank you for that question, Dana. I think you're absolutely right, is that there should be an opportunity for us to allow students to bring their experiences to one another without having it to necessarily be mediated or officiated through our own perspective. And maybe that's what Dylan Robinson gets to at, is it shouldn't be validated, or it shouldn't have to go through a process of being recognized by us or by the institution. And in fact, you're also right. There creates a huge momentum when people realize that their personal experiences are all related through the same institutions that are putting them in through these pressures. That realization that they have on their own is way more powerful than anything that I can say, hey, you're being oppressed by this institution. It's the realization in these moments. So yes, that is definitely an opportunity for us to allow our students to come together in these spaces to have conversations. And again, I think both Shauntae and Angela gave us great strategies for increasing the student engagement with each other. So maybe they can share these experiences in a way that then translates to like, well, then what do we do if it turns out that all of us are being treated this way? You know, I don't want to minimize the Me Too movement's impact on our society, but the strategy of sharing those narratives openly in a way to recognize that we have the similar structural problems and along paired with our individual experiences, I think that is powerful. Pairing individual experiences with the structural critique might be the way we can do this.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dana, for the question. Are there other questions? I'm not seeing hands at the moment. Are there any hands I'm missing? If you have other questions and don't want to raise your hand, you can drop them in the chat. Well, while we're waiting for other questions, Michael, could you say a little bit more about, I think it was it individual terrorism?
Intimate terrorism, yes.
Intimate terrorism.
Yeah, sure, of course. I'm debating whether or not to start with a personal experience or not, but the idea is that so many of us experience these moments where we're given I don't know, antagonisms, or we're put through various modes of surveillance. I've written a piece, for example, about this, of like the sense that as a scholar of color, you're always under the auspice of the university's like safety limits. So you can be a person of color up to a particular point. You can be a radical up to a certain limit, but as soon as you cross the limit of safety, the precarity becomes feelable. You can feel when you start to take up too much space, when you start to have thoughts that go against the status quo. And I think these are things that maybe we can't quite put our finger on, we can't quite describe, or we can't empiricize, let's say. But I think it's a common experience that many of us share. And maybe this is one of those examples, going back to Dana's question. I think if we all down the line, we could all point to, or maybe write a 6-word story about a moment where we felt intimate terrorism in our workplace or place of education. And then it would be about how do we connect those to the structural issues that produce these senses within ours. It's, of course, it's an interpersonal thing, but there's something within the institutions that foster this sense of competition or sense of hierarchy, whatever it is. So maybe that's what I would say.
Mhm.
And I welcome,
Okay,
of
well,
course,
that's very
Shauntae and Angela
interesting.
to think about, you know, if that's another aspect of their work that they also address.
Mhm. Well, we got another question in the chat that I think follows nicely from your explanation. And that question was, for Angela, have you ever had a 6-word story that leads to conflict?
Sure. I'll answer that. So I haven't had a 6-word story lead to conflict, but I think the question is there conflict or differing opinions or perspectives in the classroom? Can I get a yes if that's what you mean? Like people want to argue or people are fighting against each other in the space? Is that what that means? So I'm gonna wait for,
Nina's giving a
yeah.
thumbs up.
Okay, yeah.
I put a thumbs up, but yes.
Okay, sure. So one of the extra this is a great opportunity for me to do 2 things. One of the things that I'm going to do in answering that question first is say yes, because that's the point if we're generating conflict. But there are things that are happening before that, which means we're disagreeing, but we're disagreeing well. We're disagreeing well. We are disagreeing, but we're disagreeing well. There are 4 things that are happening before we get to disagree well. And I'm going to tell you what they are. And I'm thankful for this opportunity because I didn't get to it during our formal time. We've already built community before I dive in. We know everyone's name. We've had the pet plants person. We know who we love. We know what we're worried about. We're invested in our learning and each other's. I've built community before I dived in. I provide vocabulary. So I'm encouraging you to provide vocabulary, which means when we're using words, we all have the same definition of the same words. So for example, our 6-word story was about lower courts and injunctions. I might have to define lower courts and injunctions for us to continue a conversation that we're going to have with each other. Provide vocabulary. So when we're all talking, our definitions are the same for the time that we are in our space together. The third point, put in the time. I'm not going to start out with a high conflict point. I'm going to take my time to get there, and I'm not going to do it in the last 15 minutes of class. I'm going to have luxurious space for it. So I got there in a luxurious way, and I'm going to have luxurious time to close it. Take your time, put in your time, and do not rush it. And the 4th point, ask for help. Maybe you want to have a particular conflict or disagreement or debate in your class, but you may not be the best person to lead it. And that's okay. That's all right. This is when you call on your friends as a guest to come in and help move through it. And the second way that I'll answer that question is yes, there's conflict and disagreement purposely. What we didn't do together was an exercise called mapping the room, where you literally see where people stand on an issue. And the key for that is everybody will talk about why they placed themselves where they did, which is to say what side of the spectrum they're on or what side of the issue they're on. But they always deliver their viewpoint to me as the facilitator, and I'm facilitating that listening. They are not directing their viewpoint or their disagreement or this person is on one end and this person's on the other side with each other. So I do work as a mediator and a facilitator, and I feel like that creates that positions where they're not arguing with each other, they're debating ideas and not trying to annihilate people. Can we disagree with ideas without being disagreeable? So I hope, that's a lot. But maybe we'll practice mapping the room one day in a different workshop, and you'll get to see what it looks like. Thank you. I hope that was somewhat helpful.
Along that line, Angela, that's something you could do as a short course
Yeah.
at NCA. That'd be wonderful. Are there other questions? These have all been wonderful questions. Well, seeing no hands or questions, are there thoughts that our wonderful experts would like to contribute as we close?
I don't have anything extra to add. I just would say we really just have to be intentional. So intentionality would be the word that I would leave, and just thoughtful in everything that we do. So some of us, as I said, we're already doing this and maybe we need to do something more, but just being intentional about building community. And I love what Angela said is even before you can start with the difficult conversations, we have to do stuff to build community. So that would be my parting words. Intentionality.
Wonderful. Well, and with that, Shauntae, NCA is working very hard to provide resources on our website. And from each of our experts, I think that we have things that we can build to perhaps provide on NCA's website, resources connected to each of your presentations. So perhaps we can work toward that intentionally. So let's see, my last word is practice from Angela. Thank you so much. Yes, absolutely practice, very much so. And Rachel has put in the chat the link to the feedback survey. So if everyone who came today could participate in that survey, it would be great. So once again, I want to say thank you so much to Shauntae, Michael, and Angela for your wonderful presentations. I know I was the moderator today, but I learned so much from each of you, and I really appreciate everything that you had to say. And thank you for everyone who came today, and thank you for those who asked questions and for those who participated in answering the questions and participated in Angela's interactive presentation. It was all very wonderful, and I've learned a lot today from each of you. So thank you very much. And if you need anything following our VLO, please let us know, and we're happy to reach out to you. So thank you very much. And Rachel is telling us that follow-up questions to Nina's and Angela's questions. Let's see.
You can ignore that.
Oh.
I popped it in during the Q&A, but
okay.
Angela's
All
kind
right.
enough to give me an answer now.
Okay. All
Thank
right.
you,
Very
Katherine,
much.
for organizing.
Oh.
Guiding.
Well, you are more than welcome. And I also, Michael, you reminded me that I wanted to say thank you to NCA's staff members, Rachel and Patrick and Dane, who all worked with us to make this happen. We appreciate it. And I also want to say thank you to Janetta, I don't think who was on the call, but she was instrumental in helping each of the councils to present a virtual learning opportunity. So there have been many people who are bringing this forward. So thank you very much to everyone who was able to help bring this forward. So thank you, and everybody have a wonderful weekend and enjoy your day.